everyone! My name is Liz Robson, and welcome to my channel where I explore the paranormal, the unusual, and spiritual. I'm pretty sure I'm just going to be sticking to gameplay right now, because due to the pandemic, I can't even do any of the paranormal stuff I planned on doing. Thank you, COVID-19. I really appreciate it. So anyways, if you don't remember, I did 6 Days of Snow Day 1. This is Day 2. And what I forgot to mention is that 6 Days of Snow is a visual novel. It's free to play on Steam. I think I did record this beforehand, but when the music came on, it was so loud. Like, it was ridiculously loud. So hopefully we can fix this. Day 2 is not too bad, but I think for Day 3, I'm gonna have to start throwing out warnings out there. I'm gonna probably start do a little warning here, cause it's starting to get a little aggressive, I guess is the right word I'm looking for. But if you guys, if anyone's like sensitive to this kind of thing, where we have like a 40-year-old interested in a 17, 18-year-old, and you're not comfortable with something like that, maybe you should either stop watching or watch something else, because even I get a little uncomfortable. Like, by the end of Day 3, I was getting uncomfortable. So there's that. So if you guys are uncomfortable with the whole 40-year-old going after a 17, 18-year-old, don't watch this and everything. And you can even though he hasn't like straight out said it for anything, but I'm pretty sure this guy is like fantasizing sex with this 16 or 17, 18-year-old. So, but like I said, if you're uncomfortable, don't watch this. I'll try to do one that's not as graphic. Well, this wasn't even graphic. It's just kind of makes you feel a little uncomfortable. So I'll try to do a different one. We're gonna work on Day 2. Day 1, we were introduced to our writer, who is very morbid, I guess, and he feels like there's nothing going right with his. He's in a rut with his relationship, his marriage. So he decides to go on vacation. And the more I'm like reading this, because like the more you're like, okay, maybe it's not that his marriage is in a rut. It's more like he's the issue. That's how I feel. He is the issue, because he's finding things wrong with everything wrong with his wife and everything, and it's like he's blaming her for not being exciting enough or keeping his attention. And the only redeeming quality she has is her miso soup, I guess. That's what I'm getting. And so he goes on vacation. He meets the owner of the place. He doesn't like the owner because of how she treats her daughter. And it's like, my wife never treats our children like that. I was like, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure she does. But anyways, let's get into Day 2. Like I said, this place does take place in Japan. It's a free visual novel on Steam. It's just a story. There's no actual gameplay, but I thought this would be a good start. And I like the music. The music's really pretty, and the artwork's is pretty nice too. I'm sure if you guys look really closely behind Locke, there's Dr. Pepper. I have a stash of Dr. Pepper behind Locke. The next morning dawned in understated shades of gray and powder blue, and there was a pervading chill in the air. I lay in my futon for a few minutes, like a baby, eyes shut, trying to fend off the cold, to little avail. The cool air brushed aside my blankets with ease, trailing ice against each and every bump of my spine. I was thankful when, a little after 7:30, Ryuko came to deliver my breakfast like yesterday. However, she didn't stay for long. That would have been, as I already explained, improper. However, maybe it was my ingrained desire as a writer to rootle out stories from every nook and cranny. But I thought there might be a bit more to it than that. I like how he uses an excuse that he's a writer, so that's why he has these thoughts. It's because I'm a writer, so it's okay. That's not how it works. Alright. Ryuko seemed hurried. Her greeting was awfully clipped compared to her congenial tones that day before. It made me wonder, and I continued to wonder while I ate my breakfast, which consisted of white rice and sari. Maybe Ryuko was being overworked. I wouldn't put it past Miss Kakiochi. Though I knew little about the woman, and it seemed unfair to judge her character based on Yosuke's observation, the way she had shouted for Ryuko yesterday did not bode well. My mother had certainly never spoken to me like that when I was a child. Liar. That is such a lie. Sachiko, meanwhile, would have sooner eaten a bar of soap than scold Kenta or Kenji, our little boys, who weren't so little now, come to think of it. Liar. And I'm pretty sure she was just like, call her like, Ryuko, we have a customer. Come here so you can guide them to their room. Alright, Kenta was 22. Kenji was 17. Okay, if you must know, if you guys remember in day 1, he said that Ryuko didn't look any older than his son Kenji. He just said his son Kenji is 17. He's lusting after this person who's only 17, is what he's saying. She might be a year older than his son. She might be a year younger. We don't know. She's just around the age of his son Kenji. Right, practically an adult. Yep. Excuse me. I just like how he comes up with excuses. Like, oh, he's almost an adult. He's practically an adult, so it's okay. But children never stop being children to their parents, even when they have children of their own and debts, and their hair starts to thin. That's just how parents are. What of Miss Kakiochi, though? What of Ryuko? Just a mother and child. Normal. It was not too unusual, I suppose, for a daughter to help her mother with a family business, particularly a business that was secreted away in the mountains and might struggle to maintain regular staff. But interacting with your mother, not only as a parent, but an employer, must have placed some undue strain on their relationship, and it was obvious that it was strained. I completely added a word in there, but that's okay. That had been more than apparent, judging by the way Ryuko shied away from her mother. These idle thoughts kept me busy throughout breakfast. I suppose the sari was delicious, the skin light, crispy, flavored with just a pinch of salt, but I hardly tasted it. This time, it wasn't because I was comparing the quality of the cooking to Sachiko's. To be perfectly honest, I wasn't thinking about Sachiko at all. No. He is lusting after 17-year-old. I finished my breakfast, leaving only the skeleton of the sari behind. Its ribcage was snowy white, the slender bones curved in a gentle arch. Oh, we got the music. Beautiful music. Alright, with a full stomach and nothing else to do, I glanced vacantly out of the window. I'd thought something sounded strange when I awoke, but it was only now, well fed and well rested, that I realized what it was. It was no longer snowing. I had grown so accustomed to the sound of the falling snow, the lack of it was disconcerting. I think that's how you say it. If If I say anything wrong, please educate me. My pronunciation for both English and Japanese is terrible. It is hard to put it into words. But I suppose it was like hearing an old song, a childhood favorite, played one note out of tune. All right. The ground was thick and heavy with snow, like a blanket. The trees that lined the inn were naked husks, strips of their leaves. Their branches were laden with snow, their trunks wreathed with frost. Did I say that right? Wreathed? The branches looked like long, slender fingers reaching into the sky, seeking refuge, perhaps, from the cold. But their pleas would not be answered. Though it had ceased snowing for the moment, at least, the weather could hardly be called warm. Warm. My southern really comes out when I say that. Warm. It's so warm out. The sun outside shone weakly, but it was a rather poor effort. This music's so soothing. I don't think I've ever seen such a melancholy sun before. There, we did it. So fragile, so delicate, and so tiny, too. It might as well have been a pinprick, a pinhead, a baby's fingernail. Okay. I shifted strangely, anxious. But it didn't work. For a few moments, I feared I really was at the bottom of a well. Even the playful wind had abated. It was quiet enough to be eerie. I could hear the sound of my own heart beating. In the still silence, frozen like a photograph, there was nothing to distract me from myself. Time to write. I scrambled to my feet. All of a sudden, I felt anxious, though I wasn't sure why. Worry weighed down my subconscious, but it was a nebulous and vague kind of worry I couldn't explain. Alright, because I couldn't discern the source of my anxiety, I wasn't sure how to go about placating it, and that troubled me all the more. It was better then to move. I couldn't stay in my room any longer. I clicked it. Okay. If I did, I might have gone mad. Usually if your mind starts like wandering and everything, and you start coming up with different scenarios as a writer, that's probably the best time to write. And just write. You never know what great works come out. That's what I learned. I crept along the wooden corridor as quietly as I could. It was still relatively early in the morning, and I didn't want to disturb any of the guests. Not that I'd seen any other guests. I presumed there must have been other guests, though, or Ryuko would not have looked so put upon that morning. While I had been lying on my futon, luxuriating in what little heat it afforded me, had Ryuko already been up and about, sweeping floors and conveying messages to the cook, and jumping at the sound of her mother's authoritarian tones. Not for the first time, I felt sorry for the girl. It was unfortunate my pity had very few practical applications. That took me so long to read. I kept quiet, my head bent, and continued to pick my way down the hallway. That scared me for some reason. the little creak that they did for his footsteps. Oh my god. I'm tired, okay? No matter how silently I attempted to tread, the floor creaked all the same, announcing my presence to whoever cared to listen. Sounds like my house. But there was nobody around to listen. If there were other guests, they were tucked away in their rooms, still fast asleep. It was so quiet, save for the sounds of myself and my own shuffling. I could almost bring myself to believe I was the only person left alive. The only one in the whole world. There were no other guests at the Azami Inn. Why would there be? If there were guests, they wouldn't be flesh and blood humans. You'd have to be crazy to come to a secluded place like this of your own accord. You know what? I would go to this place on my own accord. This place sounds nice. No, there were no humans here. Only ghosts. Maybe when I was sleeping, the ghost crept out of the shadows and held parties. They would tell stories of the good old days and play the koto and let the sake flow. I always wanted to see someone play the koto in person. Alright. What else was there to do in these mountains, even for ghosts? It sounds like a good, honeymoon getaway. That's what I think. If they were hopeful spinsters or helpless romantics, they wouldn't find their second halves here. Okay. If they were downtrodden servants or lonely proprietors of decades past, they wouldn't find comfort here. If they were warlords or samurai seeking revenge against their defeated kingsmen, they wouldn't find salvation here. It was far too desolate. Oh, back to the beautiful music. Oh, that music is so beautiful. I love it. It's so nice. While conjuring up the stories inside my head, I failed to realize I had managed to stumble across a prominent figure of the inn's current state. That is, until said figure in question cleared her throat and gave me a curious look. Mr. Tanabe, excuse me, Mr. Tanabe. Oh! I started blinking away the hazy ghost from yesteryear that had settled behind my eyelids like the snow. The helpless romantics dissolved into fits of tears, and the downtrodden servants bowed themselves into non-existence, and the shamed samurai skulked away into the shadows. There was nobody left in the Azami Inn. Nobody save for myself and my hostess, Miss Kakiocho Kayo. I apologize, I said hastily, bowing my head. I didn't mean to ignore you. I was just lost in my own world, I suppose. It's quite all right, said Miss Kakiochi, though I had my doubts. I didn't take Miss Kakiochi for the kind of woman who appreciated being ignored. I don't think anybody enjoys being ignored. How else can we confirm our own existence, if not with the eyes of others? But Miss Kakiochi seemed to have less patience with it than most. I just wanted to ask, Miss Kakiochi continued, her voice smooth and soft, whether you had a pleasant night. It was fine, thank you, I responded in turn, just as she had expected, polite yet distant. We could have been two birds passing by on opposing migratory paths, one going north and one going south, never to see each other again. That's what most human relationships boil down to. Ah, all of this snow must have made me solipsistic. Or maybe it was the cold. I hope the wind did not keep you awake, Miss Kakiochi asked. It took a bit of getting used to, I said carefully, but I was able to settle down in the end. There are different noises everywhere you go. Tokyo can be loud at night, too. I can imagine, said Miss Kakiochi, with the air of one who did not care to imagine at all. Do you have any plans? I thought I might go for a walk. There is a little else to do here, and the forest looks very pretty. Like something from a fairy tale. It is pretty, Miss Kakiochi agreed, but you have to be careful. I wouldn't want you to wander off and get lost. It would be bad for your business? Oh god, this guy's such an idiot. He's such a jerk. Losing a guest would not set us in a great esteem, no. She didn't even smile at my joke. I was sure Ryuko would have. It's not something to joke about. Go for a walk by all means, but don't venture too far into the forest. There should be some signs that point to Higashikawa. That's the nearby village. If you keep sight of those signs, you should be fine. After trying to pronounce Higashikawa, I struggled with the rest of the sentence. I just gotta remember the basics of Japanese. Alright, thank you. It's no problem, said Miss Kakiochi. And of course it wasn't. She was just doing her job. She wasn't telling me to be careful because she liked me. She hardly knew me, and I didn't think my first impressions had been all that favorable. Just as I didn't particularly like Miss Kakiochi, I got the feeling that she didn't particularly like me either. Swear to God, if I see any more particularly, I'm gonna be mad. I'm not sure why I thought that. Call it paranoia, if you will, but the way Miss Kakiochi surveyed me, her eyes narrowed, left me with no doubts we were not, and never could be, friends. Just try to come back before 12. You don't have to, of course, but if you want to eat lunch in the inn, that would be advisable. There aren't many restaurants around here, unless you're prepared to walk in the snow for miles or hire a taxi. I bowed my head, thanked her again, and then I left. I had no desire to look back. The crisp air, chilled from the snow that had fallen last night, danced across the tip of my tongue. It was soothing and set me at ease, perhaps perversely, given it was so frigid. Why is that so hard for me to read? If it had been cold inside the inn, that was nothing compared to the temperature outside of its old wooden walls. The air felt cold enough to preserve a corpse, leaving it in an impeccable, pristine condition, like a doll freshly unwrapped from a box filled with tissue paper. Miss Kakiochi, however, was even colder. God, he's so judgmental. I was content to presume that Miss Kakiochi's blood was warm and red like mine, but there was something about her that unsettled me. Ryuko, meanwhile, had to live with the woman. The poor girl had my condolences. He's so judgmental. I hate him. As I walked, following the wooden signs Miss Kakiochi had pointed out to me, the snow crunched beneath the soles of my shoes. When I glanced behind me at the winding path I had taken through the forest, I could see a long line of footprints. They were the only blemishes in the otherwise flawless canvas. I felt a little sad that my presence had disturbed the environment, so I wasn't worth it. Nope, here comes the morbidness again. Oh god, that scared me. Who did that? So, alright, let's get back to reading after getting scared half to death by someone throwing something down the stairs. The snow, though ephemeral, seemed to have far more value than I did. It was prettier at any rate, and probably brought people more joy. God, he's so depressing. Most of my poems, my novels included, were rather gloomy works. The critics had panned my novel particularly, claiming it was rather too maudlin, and not realistically so. Perhaps that was because I was writing from a position of privilege. How could I write about sadness, true, deep, untapped sadness, when I had lived a comfortable life, accompanied by a loving wife and 2 devoted sons. I knew she would message. I never before experienced great loss or grief or sorrow. What about your parents? Just boredom. And I had the nerve to tire of Sachiko's presence simply because I had grown accustomed to the taste of her miso soup. Again, only redeeming quality of his wife is miso soup. When I looked at it like that, I was a horrible human being. Well, at least you're aware. Did I even deserve to have a wife like Sachiko? Sachiko had never wronged me, and yet, at the same time, I found I could no longer stand to be in the same room as her. Alright, Sachiko's servility, which had once seemed so charming, was now nothing more than an irritant. It was almost as though my vile thoughts were staining the snow rather than my feet. I felt as I walked that my existence was making the world a worse place. Perhaps it would have been better if I simply slipped away like the melting snow. However, I was too old for such flights of fancy, and I knew I couldn't be irresponsible. Sachiko was waiting for me, and so were Kenta and Kenji. I had formed too many connections during my life, and I couldn't afford to sever them over a few childish impulses. Starting a new life? How could I out here? It sounded like a romantic prospect, but I would soon grow sick and tired of the snow. Just as I had grown sick and tired of Sachiko. Sachiko and her miso soup, which was so predictably delicious, it was almost irritating. I laughed wearily to myself. How lucky was I that this was all I had to be upset about. It was almost like my life was too perfect. I wondered what Ryuko would make of my book. Perhaps she would like it. Women seemed to favor my writing more than men, perhaps because I had a fondness for penning romantic stories. Mawkish romance stories where nothing went right and everything fell apart. My novel was about a young girl apprenticed to be a geisha. Of course, I myself have never been apprenticed as a geisha. I am not a woman. Maybe that was why my book didn't sound sincere. I had no idea what I was doing, really. I was just fantasizing. But Sachiko liked it. Then again, Sachiko liked everything I did. I didn't know if I could trust her opinion. I paused at another wooden sign. Apparently, Higashikawa was 10 miles away. The wooden sign was a useful landmark amidst the sea of mere maze repetitions. Out here in the strangely silent forest, the trees seemed endless. They formed a truly dizzying collection of brown trunks with icy boughs. No trees here would bear fruit. They were frozen. A robin twittered overhead. The delicate figure of the bird hopped amongst the branches, its head tilted to one side. Its colorful feathers seemed to glow against the snow, a splash of orange against the white. Oh, the beautiful music's gone. My walk brought some much-needed color to my face. My cheeks were flushed with blood and my fingers were tingling pleasantly from the cold. I returned to my room at midday with the intention of secluding myself beneath the warmth of my kotatsu, but... oh! My plans had not accounted for an uninvited but not unwanted guest. Ryuko was kneeling in the corner of my room, my breakfast tray at her feet. I gathered that she had been in the process of clearing away my morning meal. A little late, wasn't it? But something had distracted her. It was a book. To be more precise, it was a book of poetry, a neat little anthology, bound in leather. This would not have been too startling were it were not for one crucial point. Okay, that was a weird sentence. Why is there so many words? They were not just any poems. They were my poems. I wasn't the sort of person to travel with a book of my own poetry, you understand? That would be rather arrogant of me, and I never been overly proud of my work either. Am I blinking? Some of the poems in this collection were a good 20 years old or more, and I felt my style had matured a lot since then. There were oh so many useless, unnecessary words in those earlier efforts, and if they were emotionally affecting, they were overly sentimental. In my opinion, poetry shouldn't try to bludgeon the reader over the head with unwieldy masses of words. Poems should use their words carefully, like tools. Each and every syllable should be selected to achieve an overall effect. You could liken it to a doctor performing a delicate operation. He shouldn't use unnecessary instruments or apply too much pressure. That isn't the sign of a good doctor. Novice writers, I think, mistake their large vocabulary for unequivocal genius and struggle to utilize as many grandiloquent terms and phrases or as possible to prove their own superiority, not to benefit their reader's experience, but for the sake of their own bloated egotism. That was a lot of big words. It's quite a tiresome experience. Yeah, you just used a whole bunch of unnecessary words. In an event, I hadn't packed the anthology of poetry myself. Sachiko had. I wasn't sure why she thought I wanted it. Maybe she thought it would help me with my writing, if I could reflect upon my past failures. Not that Sachiko would have called any of my works failures. Even some of the more trite pieces. Trite. Returning to my room, cold and tired, to discover Ryuko poring through my poems, however. This was an unexpected development, and my mouth parted in a small circle of abashed surprise. Some of my poems were rather personal, and I wasn't accomplished enough in my youth to be cryptic. I was too in love with myself to cut down the details. There were poems in there about my childhood and my parents, and the kite I had when I was a young boy. There were poems about meeting Sachiko and viewing the cherry blossoms together in Ueno Park. Is it Ueno? Ueno Park. And the birth of our first son, Kenta. It was, in other words, an overview of my entire life. This little girl, whom I had barely spoken to, now held my history in her hands. Whether she realized it or not, this gave her an immense amount of power. I think she must have understood the gravity of her crime in some part, because she looked abashed and dropped the book as though it burnt. I'm sorry, she stuttered. I know I shouldn't have, but I was clearing away your breakfast things, and then I saw this in your case, and I know it was wrong of me, but I was just so curious. It's all right. I don't mind, really. I understand completely if you want to file a complaint. I'll accept any kind of punishment. And then she broke off, blinking in surprise. Did you say you don't mind? Well, I coughed and ran one hand through my hair. I suppose this is somewhat embarrassing. I'm not overly keen on that anthology. Oh, you're not? Ryuko asked, inclining her head to one side. Why are you carrying around a volume of poems that you don't care for, then? It was a good question. My wife packed it. Oh, Ryuko said again, the syllable slipping from her lips, as clear as stream water. Does your wife like poetry? Sachiko isn't too familiar with poetry. I think she likes this collection because she feels that she has to. I'm not sure how much she understands, I winced, but that sounds rather pretentious. Ryuko looked down at the tatami floor, subtly shy. I know I'm rather young, and my opinion probably doesn't count for much, but I liked those poems. You did? Yes, well, I didn't finish all of them, but they were very pretty. So detailed, too. The detail is the worst thing. You can over-embellish. Well, maybe it was a bit too much at points, but I think that shows how passionate the writer is. Yes, said Ryuko, nodding as she came to the conclusion. That's it. They're very passionate. The writer really painted a picture with their words. I could see everything so clearly. I was transfixed. Even the poem about the fireworks? Especially the poem about the fireworks. Ryuko's own irises seemed to light up with bursts of pyrotechnic wonder. Goodness, I sighed, letting my head meet my hands. That poem is the worst of the bunch. Well, maybe you can't understand it because you're a man. It's a very romantic poem. Ah, yes. The poem about the fireworks. It was one of the first poems I had ever written. It had been popular when I published it in the local newspaper, and was perhaps one of my better known works. For that reason, I hated it. Looking back on it, it seemed far too juvenile and immature. The imagery was labored, piled on with a shovel, and the theme of silence was integrated clumsily. A poem about silence should know better than to fill every single space for breath with unwieldy words. And as for the lovers leaning in to share their first kiss, well, it was Sachiko's favorite poem of mine too. She always said reading it made her happy. It helped her remember. I tried to tell Sachiko that my words were too labored and imperfect to be an accurate depiction of real events, but she didn't seem to care. Apparently, this overflowing of emotion added to the piece. It's a passionate poem, said Ryuko dreamily, fireworks still sparkling in her irises, but it's rather dignified at the same time. It's a passion that threatens to spill over as the couple's lips draw closer together. She sighed, breathless, and held one hand against her chest. I wish I could kiss somebody like that. But my mother would never allow it. I'll die without ever being kissed, and then maybe the people in Higashikawa will tell ghost stories about me. It seemed like quite a muddling end for such a young girl. Maybe that was why Ryuko looked so troubled. I've never seen fireworks before, but that poem was so vivid. It helped me imagine. Ryuko shifted, her face a little flushed from her sudden confession. Perhaps she was embarrassed. I felt a touch embarrassed on her behalf, but she didn't duck her head or try to hide behind her hands. I came to clear away your breakfast half an hour ago, but I got so taken in by these poems, I forgot what I was supposed to be doing. It was the fireworks poem especially. Of course it was. It was always the fireworks poem. Perhaps it wasn't such a bad piece then, if Ryuko rated it so highly. But a stubborn part of me didn't want to accept that. I had written it years ago. Surely I had created finer works since. But did the quality of my craft matter when the general public Preferred my older pieces? More imperfect in their construction, yes, but perhaps more emotionally charged because of their naivete. Is it like naivety or something like that? I wasn't really sure how to feel. I was pleased Ryuko enjoyed my poem at the same time, but at the same time, it was a bit unsatisfying. I realized this guy's not quite, like, easily satisfied. That's what I've noticed. It isn't nice to think that you haven't progressed at all in your craft, and in fact may have gone backwards over 2 decades. 20 years. It's a long time. Too long, rather, to cling to youthful remembrance of first kisses stolen beneath the star-filled sky. I didn't know what to do with myself after I read the poem, Ryuko confessed. I just sat there thinking. I wet my lips with my tongue. All of a sudden, my throat felt rather dry. If you don't mind me asking, what did it make you think about exactly? Okay. I know exactly what he's thinking. Sir. Sir, this is a casual conversation. We do not need to sexualize this conversation. Oh, all kinds of things, said Ryuko. I thought about festivals I'll never go to, and pretty clothes I'll never wear, and boys I'll never kiss. She smiled sheepishly. What am I saying? I must sound so selfish and uncultured. Reading such a pretty poem and only thinking about myself. I bet there are deeper themes in there, and I'm too stupid to see them. The author would probably be mad at me. Oh no, I said. The author wouldn't be mad at you at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite. How can you be so certain? Do you know them? Quite intimately, in fact. You see... Okay. I paused for dramatic effect, amused by the theatricality of the whole thing. In that moment, I could have been a disciple of the Kabuki theater. Ryuko stared at me expectantly, her hands clenched into fists. For a few moments, it seemed as though neither of us could breathe, but it wasn't that foolish. I already knew the grand reveal, but Ryuko didn't. Not yet. Tanabe Eiichi, I said, gesturing to the front cover of my anthology. I'm not sure if I gave you my full name yesterday, but, well, I spread my arms, a modest expression on my face. That's me. Oh! Ryuko looked at the cover of the book, then back at me. She stared. Then her lips fell open in the neat little ring, so perfectly formed I half wanted to run a thread of cotton through it, and her cheeks flushed. It was remarkable, really, how red she could become when it was so cold outside. It was less cold, however, with another body to keep me company. Calm down, sir. Just calm down. Ryuko's mere presence seemed to make everything cozier. Then does that mean the one who wrote those poems was... That's right. I wrote them. Oh, but I hastened to append, because Ryuko seemed to be on the verge of a breakdown. Some of these are rather old. I might as well be a different man now. Certainly, nothing I'd written since the Evidence of Fireworks had achieved such levels of popularity. Okay. Unfortunately, this attempt to placate Ryuko did not have the intended effect. Her eyes were wide open, pupils swimming about in the whites, and she opened and closed her mouth with juddering motions, like keys stuck on a typewriter. You? I can't believe it, she exclaimed, and then she bowed so deeply she almost knocked her forehead against the floor. And here I was talking about the author's intentions and acting so high and mighty when you were the one who wrote it to begin with. I must have sounded so stupid. You didn't sound stupid. I'm flattered that you like my poem so much. It's touching. If only it had been a poem rather than fireworks. But I said maybe you can't understand. I can't believe I said that. Of course you understand. It's your poem. You know far more about it than I do. That's a long paragraph. Right. That isn't necessarily true. Hearing a new perspective is always refreshing. There's a chance I could be conveying some themes even I didn't notice. And each piece of writing means something different to every person that reads it. We all have different experiences, and that helps us engage with the text in different ways. But what if I read it wrong? There isn't a right or wrong way to read a poem, and I'm not a teacher. I'm not grading you on this. Please, try to calm down. I paused. And you don't need to keep bowing either. I was hardly deserving of such a show of subjection. I was only a writer, and not a particularly talented one either. That was what the critics said. Okay. When I saw Ryuko's face, however, so shy and flustered, the tips of her ears were turning pink. The words of the critics who said fireworks was overwrought and overrated didn't seem to matter all that much. Oh! Ryuko seized in her insistent motions of reverence, which must have been making her dizzy, and blinked at me. I'm sorry. I just, she whimpered, I feel like such a fool. Like I should stop talking, probably forever. Everyone would be so much happier that way. I wouldn't. What do you mean? I mean... I swallowed. What did I mean? I like hearing about your opinions. It's interesting. Oh, I see. But Ryuko didn't see. Not then, at least. I must admit, at that moment, neither did I. I knew that I liked her, but I didn't know quite how much I liked her, or how much I would come to think to like her. I wanted to tell Ryuko that I enjoyed her company, but all of a sudden I felt bashful, and I couldn't get the words out. My thoughts danced about inside my head, just like the snow that was beginning to fall beyond my window. At that moment, the falling snow looked especially pretty. I remember thinking to myself, maybe I should write a poem about it. I had sworn off poetry for a while. I tried to tell myself, because of some harsh contemporary criticism, but maybe for Ryuko. It might be worth pursuing, but there would be no fireworks this time. Just snow. Pure white, endless snow. The third day. Alright. Oh my god. That took so long. I actually think I read this through a little more smoother. I did struggle a few words, a few sayings. There were words I knew how to say. I just couldn't, say them. That was day 2. Like I said, day 1 and day 2 aren't that bad. There are some things that are hinting to what he's thinking, but it's not. It gets worse. That's what it feels like. Like, every day it gets worse. It's gonna get uncomfortable. Because he's starting to, visualize her more. He's spending more time with her more. So, like I said, day 1 and 2 aren't that bad. I hope you guys enjoyed day 2. If you want me to continue doing this, please let me know. Leave a thumbs up if you want. If you have any suggestions on what other visual novels I should read or what games I should play for this channel, please leave them in the comment section below. I I say a lot. If I mispronounced anything or you feel like I mispronounced something, please leave it in the comments section below so that way I can learn from you guys. I'm going to head out for now. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys again some other time. All right. Bye.